So, here we go. I figured that today would be the best time to talk about the worst typewriter. Now, this is a machine that has been floating around for a number of years ago, and it is a newly manufactured manual typewriter. And it is made by a company that's based out of Shanghai and operates under the name Rover. Now, they manufacture two models of typewriters. This model here, which I believe is called the New Model 11 typewriter, and a different model called the Carnia. And it is that previous model machine that is actually the Royal Epoch. Now, Royal also purchased a batch of these machines with a metal body shell and are rebranding it the Royal Classic. This machine first became popular when it was picked up a number of years ago by the Michaels Craft Store and rebranded by a company called Memory Keepers, and it was labeled the Typecast typewriter. Now, when that machine came out, I did a little bit of a write-up on it on my blog, and this was like back in, I don't know, 2017. And it really was a uniquely terrible typewriter. It was so bad that even the type slugs inside the machine were made out of plastic. So this is kind of the updated assessment of that machine, because this is the updated machine, and it's got a little bit more metal in a few places. This particular one is branded Maplefield, but it is also branded under the Oliver Typewriter Company and sold by Home Depot, as well as a handful of other company names. Don't know why I'm getting a text. Despite all of its popularity in recent years, it is still probably one of the worst typewriters you can buy, despite the improvements to the mechanism and the building materials. So we'll bring the camera a little bit closer and give you a very quick walkthrough of this machine and what makes it so bad. Of course, one of the primary concerns with this typewriter is its plastic body shell. Now, these machines are made with a metal body shell, so that can be kind of overlooked. The front cover slides towards you and lifts off, which I think is actually a pretty handy mechanism for a ribbon cover release. The machine itself is a pretty standard typewriter. It takes your 2-inch universal spools and a 1/2-inch ribbon. Now, immediately there are a few things that are concerning to me as soon as you remove the cover. The biggest concern is this type segment, which is completely made out of plastic. And this is the only machine that I have seen so far with a plastic type segment. If that breaks, your machine is dead. Unless you, of course, get a donor machine and completely swap out that center part, which is a pain in the ass. Looks like we do have a metal bearing rod in there, which is decent, and these two little plugs. The type slugs, which were plastic on the Typecast branded typewriter, are now metal, which means they no longer snap or fly off. However, on one of these keys, I took a file to the end of the type slug, hopefully we can focus on that, and discovered that this is a very soft metal. I'm not even sure if it's steel. It is certainly not hardened metal, which means that they are likely to wear out, and if you jam two keys and you hit another one behind it, you're likely to damage the type. The other thing I find concerning is that we don't really have a great card holder system. We have two clear card holders that are spaced very far apart, and the ribbon vibrator and type guide is just kind of floating in the middle. You don't have a great guide of where you're typing when you're looking at the machine and trying to line up your text in the center. Your reference points are very far to the end. Most older typewriters will have a card holder or a line scale directly behind the type guide. Another area of concern on the top of the machine, we're still going with these, is the completely plastic ribbon drive mechanisms. The only metal part is the little pawl and springs that actuate the actual drive and the small ribbon tensioner, which isn't the greatest. The entire mechanism is this very cheap and flimsy plastic and moves all over the place and is very likely to snap. For most intents and purposes, this will work just fine. The main point of weakness is going to be the actual ribbon spokes. This is the main post that your ribbon goes on, as well as the indexing post Both of those are very weak plastic and likely to break after repeated use. The final big area of concern facing the front of the machine is the low tolerances in the segment shift type basket. Actually, this is not as bad as it was a few days ago. Okay, a couple of days ago I was in here and this whole thing was just rattling about. But you know what? That's a lot more solid now than it was before. I mean, still, you know, it's not great. Which is, of course, the other thing is this machine has horrible text alignment. So I'm going to go through a few things today to see if we can fix that. Now, if we flip the machine on the back, we notice that we do indeed have metal subframe. And this is not bad. I have seen Olivetti's with thinner mechanisms in there. None of this is hardened steel. As you can see, with very little effort, we can just bend these parts in and out, which means that it is not the most reliable machine long term. There's a lot of springs in there, some decent tension. Down in the escapement, if we look down here, we have a braking system for the repeat spacer, which is geared to the escapement wheel. This is a 3-layer escapement wheel. We have a small rack on a small pinion on top that engages the carriage rack, and then we have a larger pinion in the middle that engages the brake system and your star wheel on the bottom. And it does work pretty well. It has a nice silent return. Mainspring is kind of small, but I have seen smaller. Overall, the machine is decently reinforced. There's a lot of sections, especially with the spacebar levers and mechanisms, that have a lot of folded steel pivots to keep rigidity. So that has greatly improved on this machine. It's plenty more rigid than it was before. So I feel like the longevity of this mechanism isn't going to be too terrible. Most of the screws in here are also Phillips head screws. Now, I have noticed, and on this machine already, the feed rollers are really hard and kind of starting to flake and chip a little bit, and the platen is a bit slick. So the rubber on this machine is not going to last you a very long time. The carriage itself is pretty stable. Poor type guide and just a not very stable type basket. So let's do a little bit of type testing on this machine and to give you an idea of what that alignment looks like. You can see that that print is very wonky. It's all over the place. Let's just do the alphabet real quick. We'll pull this out for you to see. Yeah, that is not at all straight. And we'll compare that quickly to this Olivetti Lettera 35, which is a solid metal bodied typewriter that has a plastic carriage return. And these also came in plastic bodied configurations. So it's a decent comparison. And if we take the hood off and we try to wiggle this, it does not move at all. Not to mention, we have a couple nice reference guides right by the type guide. And a solid metal ribbon drive system. So we'll look at the alignment on this machine, and it is loads better, and the impression top to bottom of the characters is a lot more even. Now, I was going to smash this machine and throw it out after I scrapped it for parts, but I'm not sure that's the best thing to do. I'll probably sell it for cheap for somebody, but I do want to take a look and see if there is anything we can do with this alignment. And I already experimented with one of the keys here, the A key, and I used a type alignment tool. I managed to bump the A up a little bit higher than it was printing before. Now, I don't think that these machines are soldered. I think the type slugs are cast and then they're epoxied onto the ends of the type bars. We don't even have a rubber rest. It's just a solid piece of plastic down there. So I'm going to grab some tools, pull this over to the bench, and see if we can do anything to even out this type. What I'm using here is a type bar crimp tool. This one's manufactured by IBM, and all it does is pinch the type bar in between these two angled jaws and expand the metal so it sits a little bit taller. In addition to that, I also have a 9-jawed plier, which helps you bend the type bar in side-to-side motions, as well as a roller bender, which bends the pitch of the type bar forward or back. So between the three of these tools, hopefully we can make this thing print just a little bit nicer. Sample text, I can see already that there's a few letters that need to be raised, and then afterwards a few letters that need to be adjusted side to side. So we're going to tackle the L first, because that seems to be the lowest. I'll just stick that into the crimp pliers and apply gentle pressure to try and raise that up a little bit. And it is still significantly low, so we're just going to do that again and apply some more pressure this time. So on the left side there, it was still sitting too low, and now on the right side it is better aligned. So we're going to go on now and try the O. Test and go along as you type. See, we also need to bring this to the right a little bit, and I tend to do that just with my fingers. We'll bring that up a bit more. Shifting into a new location so I don't continue to stress the exact same portion of the type bar. And then we're going to take a normal pair of pliers and give it kind of a lateral twist there. Not necessarily what we wanted. There we go. So aligning the type is a lot of trial and error. There we go. So type alignment is a lot of trial and error. I think we're going to have to bend the top of that back ever so slightly. There we go. Let's see if we got anything. Looks like we also need to raise this again. Alrighty, let me go check that. It took freaking forever. It's still printing a little bit to the left, but unless I want to do a huge amount more of adjustments, I think that's about where it's gonna stay. It's at least printing in a flat line. It's a little bit better. There's still a few letters that are wonky. What the biggest problem here is, of course, how uneven and unstable the type basket is. This should not be moving at all, so I'm going to try and see if I can adjust these side bearings there. I see a series of star-headed screws and maybe tighten it up a little bit. And on the back side of the machine, if I can get the camera down there, we have a small bracket right here, you can see, and it's held in place with 3 star-head screws. I removed or loosened the top 2, pushed the bracket inward to take out the tension and the slack, and I tightened those screws back down. And that seems to have helped a lot in eliminating the play in that basket. As you can see, that is now very solid, and the shift is moving smoothly. So let's do another quick type sample. That looks a lot nicer. I might be so inclined as to say that that looks good. I am I feel really bad saying that I'm somewhat impressed. Now, obviously, when you buy a brand new typewriter, you shouldn't expect to have to do all of these adjustments to it just to get it working. And indeed, I've probably been doing this for about 45 minutes already. But the improvements from where we started is quite remarkable. Uncovered a fatal flaw. If we take a look here at our pairs of capital and lowercase letters, we see that a number of them, like M and H, are near perfect, as well as I, but we have a few like A, C, D, kind of like the band AC/DC, and W, which are not at all aligned. This means that there are inconsistencies in the casting of the slugs themselves that prevents this machine from ever being able to typewrite without extensive adjustments. In order to fix this, we would have to cut the slug in two and move each individual half into alignment. And I am just not going to bother on a machine that I'm only going to charge like 50 bucks for. So the priority is, of course, getting it to type as straight as we can in lowercase letters, because that's what most people are going to be typing in. But because the actual slugs themselves are not properly manufactured, we will never get this machine perfectly typing. I think this is about as good as it gets. It's legible, it's decent, but the actual feel to the keyboard is not very great. The mechanisms pivot right in front of their first row of keys, so despite being a mid-sized machine, it feels like most ultra portables, which I don't like, because as those keys roll, they give you a very steep pitch, and that can kind of dig into the front of your fingernail. So all in all, it's not the most comfortable machine to type on, and even with our touch control all the way on the low setting, it's pretty heavy-handed. I will say that the metal slugs do greatly improve the momentum built up by the type, so it's a little bit easier to get a good, even impression. But all in all, I can't really recommend this machine. There's just so many far, far better options. But at the end of the day, I mean, it is kind of a waste of money, but also it does what it's supposed to do, even though it doesn't do it that well. Yeah, I'm gonna think about this a little bit more. My end thoughts is, if you're looking for a machine to give a kid and you can find one of these second-hand that doesn't cost $250, then it's probably an okay thing to buy. They'll be rough on it, they'll break some things, but at the end of the day, it shouldn't cost you that much money. I do not think that the quality of this machine is worth the price point. It is very difficult to make modern machines of a high quality, because in order to do that, you have to charge prices that the consumer is not willing to pay in this day and age. I do think that if they put a little bit more effort into the type alignment and bumped the price up to 50 or 100 bucks, this would be a much better machine. But as of now, I cannot recommend this for any official writing or long-term writing projects. This is more of a novelty item, kind of designed for greeting cards or journaling or even scrapbooking. I don't think that this is the thing you're going to write the next great American novel on, and it's certainly not anything you're going to write any business-related things on. That stuff is best left to actual antique typewriters or vintage machines with a much, much higher print quality. So yeah, I hope this was somewhat informative. Yeah, comment down below if you have any questions, or if you want to stop by the shop and scoop this machine up.